My wife and I bought the house on Kessler Road in the spring, which meant we moved in surrounded by everything looking its best. The yard was full of late blooming things the previous owner had planted. Tulips along the south fence, a climbing rose on the porch trellis that neither of us would have chosen but that we immediately decided to keep. The house itself was a 1940s two-story with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that had been updated sometime in the 90s and not touched since. We loved it in the uncritical way you love something you've just committed to. The previous owner was a man named Gerald Marsh, according to the sale documents. He'd lived in the house for over 20 years before moving to be closer to family, our realtor had told us. He'd taken good care of it. The inspection had come back clean. The first week was the controlled chaos of settling in. Boxes everywhere, takeout containers on the kitchen counter, the particular exhaustion of having made 100 small decisions about where things should live. My wife threw herself into it with energy I admired. I was slower to unpack, more likely to sit in a half-furnished room and just absorb the space. It was during one of those quiet evenings, maybe 10 days in, that I first noticed the marks on the garage wall. I'd gone out to find a box of books, and I was standing in the garage with the overhead light on when I saw them. Along the interior wall beside the side door, a series of pencil marks, the kind a person makes to track height over time. Not unusual, families do this. Children's heights noted in pencil, dated, charming in a specific, nostalgic way. But these weren't children's heights. The marks were all within a narrow range, adult height range, and the dates beside them spanned nearly 15 years. The most recent was dated 18 months ago. There were no names, just the marks, the dates, and occasionally a small notation in a cramped hand I couldn't fully decipher. I mentioned it to my wife. She looked at the marks thoughtfully and said it was probably Gerald tracking something. His own posture, maybe, or just an odd habit. She didn't seem troubled by it. I told myself she was right. 3 weeks later, I was going through the basement. We'd been avoiding it, using it mainly for storage, and I found a shelf unit against the far wall that had several items left behind. A box of old hardware, some paint cans, normal, forgotten things. But on the middle shelf, pushed toward the back, there was a small notebook. It was Gerald's. His name was written inside the front cover in the same cramped hand I recognized from the garage wall. I opened it. I know some people would say I shouldn't have, but I did, and found that it was a kind of log. Dates going back years with brief notations. Most were mundane. Weather observations, small maintenance tasks, records of grocery costs, but scattered through the pages were entries of a different character. Short, terse, referring to something he called the visitor. Not explained, not elaborated, just references. Visitor again last night, east side. Or 3 nights running, same place, told no one. Or in an entry near the back, I know who it is now, not sure what to do with that. The last entry in the notebook was dated about 2 years before he sold the house. It said only, "Leaving the light on from now on." I sat on the basement floor and read those entries 3 times. Then I thought about the porch light, which we had noticed stayed on when we viewed the house and which the realtor had mentioned as being on a timer. We'd reset the timer to turn off at midnight because we preferred the dark. I reset it back to stay on all night. I didn't tell my wife why, not immediately. I didn't want to alarm her with something I couldn't yet explain. I tried to contact Gerald Marsh through the realtor. She passed along a message. He responded through her, not directly, and what he said was brief. He hoped we were enjoying the house and that we'd find it comfortable. Nothing else. No response to the specific questions I had asked. Over the following month, I paid attention to the east side of the property. It faced a narrow drainage easement that ran between our lot and the neighboring one. Not quite an alley, not quite open land, just a neglected strip about 8 feet wide that nobody owned in any meaningful sense, accessible from the street at both ends. On a Tuesday night, well after midnight, I woke to the sound of Herschel, the name I'll give our dog, standing at the bedroom window and growling at a very low, sustained pitch. I went to the window and looked out toward the east side of the yard. The porch light, which faced the front and south side of the house, didn't reach the east well, but there was enough ambient light to see the fence line, and standing just beyond it, in the drainage easement, was a figure, still, facing the house. I woke my wife. By the time she got to the window, the figure was gone. I called the non-emergency line that morning and reported what I had seen, along with the notebook. An officer came by, read the relevant entries, walked the easement. He found nothing conclusive, but took the notebook as documentation. He asked if we'd rekeyed the locks when we moved in. We hadn't. We'd been given the cellar's keys and hadn't thought further. We rekeyed within the week. I had motion-activated lights installed on the east side. I made one more attempt to contact Gerald Marsh, this time through the realtor, with a more direct message. Had he experienced something similar on the east side of the property? She passed it along. He didn't respond at all this time. We still live in that house. The lights keep the east side bright enough now that anything out there would be well visible from the bedroom window. The easement has been quiet, but I think about that notebook, about a man who lived in that house for 20 years, watching something, tracking it, and ultimately deciding the answer was to leave a light on and eventually to sell. He left us the climbing rose and the tulips and a porch light he'd learned to keep burning. He didn't leave us an explanation. I moved into my house alone in September, newly single after a long relationship, ready for a space that was entirely mine for the first time in years. The house was small, a tidy brick ranch at the end of a cul-de-sac in a quiet suburb of a mid-sized city. 6 houses total on the circle, an established neighborhood, the kind of street where people had lived for a long time, and the yards reflected decades of care. The welcome I received was warm. Within my first week, 2 families had knocked with small offerings, a pot of soup from the couple directly across the cul-de-sac, a handwritten card from the older woman 2 houses down. People introduced themselves in driveways, learned my name, said they were glad to see the house occupied again. It had been empty for 8 months after the previous owners relocated. The neighbor to my immediate right was a man I'll call Warren. He introduced himself the day I moved in, came over while I was unloading boxes, offered to help carry, was pleasant and normal in every visible way. He was perhaps 60, lived alone as far as I could tell, kept an immaculate yard. He seemed to know everything about the neighborhood in the way that someone does who has watched it for years. The first thing I noticed was that Warren seemed to know a great deal about my schedule. Not immediately. It built slowly over the first few weeks. He'd comment on things in passing that were slightly more precise than neighborly small talk warranted. That I'd noticed I got home later on Tuesdays. That my bedroom light stayed on past midnight. That I'd been going out early on weekends lately. New running habit? Each observation, delivered casually over the fence or at the mailbox, was small enough to dismiss. People notice things. Neighbors observe. I'd tell myself that and move on. But it accumulated. By week 5, I began noticing that a particular upper window of Warren's house had a direct sight line to my front door, my driveway, and at an angle, my kitchen window. I noticed this because I happened to look up at it one evening as I was coming home and saw the curtain shift. Not dramatically, the slight movement of fabric that indicates a person stepping back. I tried to think about all the information I'd handed over in our brief exchanges.
He knew my work schedule, he knew I lived alone, he knew my bedroom was at the front of the house and that I stayed up late. He'd asked once whether I had family nearby. I'd said not locally, just a sister 2 states away. I'd answered without thinking. The questions had been friendly. That was the point. On a Friday evening, I came home and found something on my porch that I hadn't left there. A small pot of herbs with a card that said housewarming. A bit late. Warren. Completely ordinary gesture. On its own, a kindness. But the pot was sitting directly in front of my door, which meant he had been on my porch while I was out, walked up to my front door, placed something there, and walked away. I took the pot inside, put it on the kitchen counter, and sat down to think. I called my sister. She listened to the whole sequence, the observations, the window, the curtain, the porch. She didn't try to explain it away, which I appreciated. She said it sounded like a pattern worth taking seriously, and that I didn't need certainty to protect myself. I invested in a video doorbell and 2 exterior cameras that weekend. I told Warren, casually, over the fence, that I'd had them installed. I mentioned it to the couple across the cul-de-sac as well, who were friendly and whom I'd come to trust. They listened carefully, and the husband, a retired man named Frank, told me without much preamble that Warren had a reputation in the neighborhood for being particular about newcomers, that there had been complaints before. Nothing ever formal, nothing provable, just a general awareness among the longer-term residents. Frank said the previous owner of my house had stopped speaking to Warren after about a year. He didn't know the specific reason. I don't know the full shape of what Warren was doing. I know what I observed, and I know what the cameras subsequently recorded. Twice in the 3 weeks after installation, motion was detected on my front porch between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. The footage wasn't conclusive enough to take anywhere formally. Movement at the edge of the frame, not clearly attributable. The detections stopped after a month. Warren still lives next door. We exchange the minimum of cordial words that neighborhood proximity requires. I keep my schedule opaque now. I vary my hours, keep my interior lights unpredictable, leave the car in different positions. I've thought about what he wanted or what he would have done with the picture he was building. I don't think I'll ever know. Sometimes the most unsettling thing about a situation is that it resolves itself into silence before you find out where it was going. The herb pot is still on my kitchen counter. I should probably throw it out. I keep forgetting. Or maybe I keep not forgetting, and that's a different thing. I want to be upfront that when I tell this story, I don't have a tidy ending for it. There's no full resolution. There's only what I found, what I did about it, and the thing I've learned to live with afterward. I bought a fixer-upper on a county road outside a small town, a 2-story farmhouse built in the 1930s that had been in poor repair for years before coming to market. The price reflected its condition. I was a practical person with some renovation experience, and I went in with clear eyes about what I was taking on. The house sat on 3 acres, the back portion of which was overgrown and backed against a long stretch of state-owned conservation land. No rear neighbors, no visible development behind me. To the front, the county road. The nearest house in either direction was a quarter-mile away. It was exactly the kind of isolation I'd wanted. The first month was almost entirely demolition and assessment, pulling up deteriorated flooring, removing damaged drywall in the upstairs rooms, checking the structural bones. Work I found genuinely satisfying. The house had good bones. It deserved better than what it had become. I found the first one during the second week, when I was pulling drywall in the small room at the top of the stairs. Behind the drywall, between the wall studs, someone had placed a photograph in a plastic sleeve. Just the one. A photograph of the exterior of the house, taken from the front road, the house in the center of the frame. On the back of the photograph, written in pencil, a date, roughly 6 years prior. I held it in the dusty light of the upstairs room and turned it over a few times. Old houses accumulate odd things. People put objects in walls during renovation, sometimes intentionally, sometimes forgotten. I put the photograph aside and kept working. I found the second one in the east bedroom, behind a section of baseboard that had come away from the wall. Another photograph in a plastic sleeve. Same subject, the house from the road, different angle, a different date on the back. 2 years after the first. By the time I found the third one, same type, different date again, this time tucked behind a loose piece of crown molding in the downstairs hallway, I had stopped treating them as curiosities. I laid all 3 photographs out on the kitchen table and looked at them. 3 different dates spanning 6 years, 3 different angles of the same subject, all stored in protective plastic sleeves, which meant they were meant to be preserved, and all of them found inside the structure of the house, hidden behind surfaces. Someone had been photographing this house over a period of years and concealing the photographs within it, not leaving them somewhere accessible, inside the walls, behind surfaces. I went through the rest of the renovation with different eyes after that, more careful, more attentive to what I was opening up. I found 2 more photographs, one inside the frame cavity of a downstairs window, one beneath a section of subflooring in the kitchen. 5 photographs in total, 5 dates. The most recent was dated 14 months before I purchased the house. I brought them to the local sheriff's office as a group, along with the purchase documentation that established when I'd acquired the property. The deputy I spoke with was thorough and took them seriously. He couldn't identify anything in the photographs beyond what they showed, the exterior of the house, well composed, consistent. What he did tell me was that the previous owner before the one who'd sold to me, the family who'd lived there in the years the photographs were taken, had moved away somewhat suddenly. A young family. The deputy was careful about what he shared, but he acknowledged that there had been some documentation associated with their time at the property. Nothing resolved. I asked if the photographs might have been placed by someone inside the house, a family member, during renovation. He said it was possible. He also said the placement of several of them, specifically the window frame cavity and the subfloor, would have required either professional construction knowledge or specific preparation. I finished the renovation. I live in the house now. I've thought often about those photographs, about someone who watched this house for 6 years, from the road, from different vantage points, and marked their observations inside the house itself, creating a record that only someone taking the house apart would find. I don't know what that record was for. I don't know if it was a threat, or a history, or something that only made sense to the person who made it. I still find myself looking out towards the county road when I hear a car slow down. Most of them pass. Most of them